I have been sold a lie. I believed that motherhood would be the time of my life. But it wasn't, and it hasn't been, because I have postnatal depression. I never expected to be in this time and in this season. I never expected to stand in a room like this and utter those words. Motherhood has not turned out as I expected. All of the books told me it was definitely going to be the time of my life. But instead, it's been dark, it's been lonely, it's been frightening, it's been long, and it has been really, really hard. Allow me to share with you a little bit tonight on my journey with postnatal depression and what it's looked like in my life. Allow me to be honest about what it's like to pursue motherhood when it isn't the time of your life. And I hope you'll bear with me if I get a little emotional. I also have my notes with me if I need a little bit of extra courage. I still find my story hard to tell, but I know it's a great opportunity, and I should be here tonight. When we first found out that I was pregnant, I had all the same emotions I imagine many mums-to-be have. I was surprised, I was excited, I was joyful, I was a bit uncertain, and I had lots and lots of questions. But as my pregnancy moved on, things didn't quite go to plan. As you can see in the photos on screen, when I was about 6 months pregnant, I still didn't have that pregnancy bump that everybody was sure I was going to have. In fact, I was still wearing many of my pre-pregnancy clothes, which meant that daily I faced questions and comments like, "Are you sure that you're really pregnant?" Or, "Do you think there might be something wrong?" Add to that the stress of weekly growth scans with no one able to tell me that our baby was actually going to be okay. Pregnancy very quickly began to be a time of stress and a time of anxiety, a time where I was ashamed and embarrassed by my figure or lack of figure, a time of little joy or excitement, and to be honest, a time where I secretly began to wonder if I was even carrying a baby at all. Reuben was born by C-section because he was breech, which was medically very straightforward, but it was also hugely clinical. And I had imagined in the weeks before it that when I was handed my baby, a load of emotions would flood over me. Love, joy, excitement, peace, contentment. I just could not wait for those. But it didn't happen. Instead, as Reuben was handed over the blue cloth, I felt nothing. In fact, I looked at him and I thought, "That's not my baby. That can't be my baby. I haven't had a baby." At that point, fear took a grip on my head, on my heart, and just would not let go. I found being in hospital really difficult. I didn't have the most compassionate of breastfeeding teacher who constantly told me I was getting it wrong. And I found it really hard to be around other mums who looked very joyful and excited to have their baby with them. And I just could not comprehend that I actually had given birth. So much so that 24 hours after my C-section, I checked myself out of the hospital, decided that I was going to formula feed, and I walked home. I say that I decided to formula feed very matter-of-factly now because that is the past, but at that stage, I felt like a huge and utter failure. And as I made that 5-minute walk from the hospital to our home, I knew in my heart and my head that this was just not going to work. That first night home, as I sat on the sofa with Gavin, my husband, and my mum and dad, chatting very excitedly about all that was ahead, I honestly had to resist the urge to hand Reuben to one of them and to walk out of the door. You might wonder why I didn't tell somebody or speak up or say what I was feeling. Well, the truth is I did. When Reuben was 2 months old and whether he was 4 months old, I spoke to a couple of healthcare professionals, both women, and both of the responses I got were very unhelpful, and they didn't take me forward in any way that they could have or should have. So much so that I began to believe that this was all my fault, that I was the only one who felt like this, that I had missed the mum gene, that there was something inherently wrong with me that meant that I just could not be a mum. What was to be a time of fun, of enjoyment, of excitement with my newborn little baby soon became about daily survival. And that made me very ill, emotionally, mentally, and physically. The pain and the heartache of postnatal depression has taken me to the edge of a cliff. I have wanted to give up on life altogether. Ironically, the one thing that has kept me from doing that has been Reuben. Knowing that he would grow up with that stigma has been the fine line between life and death for me. Instead, I begged my closest family to lock me in a room and never, ever come back for me, as if that was somehow better. On many occasions, I had my bags packed, ready to leave, no idea where I was going, but sure that anywhere was better than here. Finally, when Reuben turned 2, hope emerged. I spoke to a different healthcare professional. He listened. He got it. I told him my story, and when I had finished, he said, "Lindsay, you have postnatal depression, but you're going to be okay. I am going to get you the help that you need." Those words were like gold dust. Hope was in the air, and I clung onto it with both hands. In fact, I honestly think I could have kissed him, but I'll assure you that I didn't. He was true to his promise, and he did get me the help that I needed. He gave me medication, antidepressants. He sent me to a mental health unit, and I had some private CBT therapy, all of which have been really key to my recovery and the journey that I have been on for the last year. 3 years after Reuben was born, and 1 year after I was diagnosed, things are finally better and brighter. Life has hope. Life is to be enjoyed, not just endured. And it's no longer about wanting to survive, it's about wanting to thrive. Thanks to my experience, I now run a website called Have You Seen That Girl? I share my story and my journey with postnatal depression, but actually even better than that, lots of other mums and dads have bravely joined me and share their story too. You see, what that means is I'm not the only one. Because research tells us that between 10 and 15% of mums or dads, because actually dads can struggle too, will suffer with postnatal depression or a perinatal mental health illness after their baby is born. What that means for me is that I didn't miss the mum gene. What that means for us as a community is that around 2,500 mums or dads will struggle with postnatal depression every year in Northern Ireland. I share my story openly and freely whenever I get the chance because I believe it's important to raise awareness and to help improve the support that's available. One of the drivers for this is this map produced by the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, of which I'm now a part, and it shows that 80% of Northern Ireland has no access to the proper healthcare that they need. 80%. So unless you live in a little pocket of Belfast where you will have fantastic support, you don't have access to the service that you need. That's not good enough. It's not good enough for our mums and dads who suffer. It's not good enough for the little ones, and it's not good enough for the family units of which they are a part. There is no blame and no shame with postnatal depression, but it's an illness that is shrouded in secrecy. Because the reality is that women in our communities are struggling with this right now. Women in our families, women in our friendship circles, women in our workplaces, maybe even a woman here tonight. But they're afraid to speak out, and they're afraid to say what is really going on, afraid of what this time and this season says about them. But here's the thing, postnatal depression doesn't define you. Postnatal depression doesn't define me. But it is time that we admit it, that it exists. It is time that we accept that it exists. It is time that we have honest conversations about what motherhood or parenthood can really look like. It's time that we see the stigma that surrounds mental health reduced or even better removed. It's time that we had better services for our mums and dads who struggle. And now is the time to see perinatal mental health on our agenda here in Northern Ireland. For this time and this season in my life, that is what I plan to dedicate myself to.
Fabulous.